Now it's time for Inspirational Women and my guest, Lucy Ashe, an English and drama teacher in New York City. Lucy also trained at the Royal Ballet School in London, and that training and life are important factors in Lucy's other career role, author. Lucy Ashe has a new book, an historical novel, The Sleeping Beauties. It's filled with dance and mystery and is an incredible tale set in World War II England. Lucy Ashe, good morning, and thank you so greatly for being with us today.
Hello, it's great to be here.
And thank you for bringing such an interesting and captivating novel to us in this new book that I have in my hands, just finished reading The Sleeping Beauties. And it's amazing how much of a page turner it is. It kind of felt like I'm not sure where we're really going with this as it started, but then it was like page after page, and I was also up into the wee hours reading. So definitely a very captivating read, and I strongly recommend it, really, for such a diverse group of readers. I think it's definitely great with the whole theme of dance in it, but motherhood and the role of women, and I really am a fan of historical fiction and really around World War II fiction. So it gathers all of that together. You've done an amazing work.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to hear that you enjoyed it.
I definitely did. And it sounds like it was maybe quite a number of years in the making that you are from England and you studied there, but you live in New York now. So I think it started in England, but then you completed the work here. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I started researching for this book pretty much straight after I finished writing my first novel, The Dance of the Dolls, because The Dance of the Dolls ends in 1933, and it's also about dance, the world of dance. And I really was still very I suppose, obsessed with that time period, and I really didn't want to leave it. So I started to think about whether I could write another dance-themed historical novel, but set more around the Second World War. And also around the ballet of The Sleeping Beauty as my inspiration. So I started researching for it pretty much straight away, and I started writing it when I was in the UK. And then I moved to the US with my husband for his job and finished the novel when I got here.
And what I found really interesting about completing the work here, I saw a little video clip that indicated that you had landed at the New York Public Library and found quite a wealth of information there.
It was wonderful. I was living in the Upper West Side at the time when I first moved over. And actually, when I first moved over, it was only in my school holidays. I was back and forth all the time because I was still working in a boarding school in the UK. And I was finding it all quite overwhelming, all of this traveling. And I found the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at the Lincoln Center. And they had so many resources and books that I needed for writing this novel about British ballet in the 1930s and 1940s, resources that I really didn't think I'd be able to find here in the US. I thought they were kind of out of print books that only I would be able to find in kind of obscure London libraries. So it made a huge difference because for historical research, you need those books around you. You need to be immersing yourself in the research kind of at all stages. I did a lot of research before I started writing, but then while I was writing, you need to be able to throw yourself back into different moments, researching costumes, dancers from the time, some of the tours that the company went on during the war. So it was wonderful to be able to work in that library and also to have a space to sit and work and write in a new city. It made me feel more at home.
Well, thinking about that, working in the library, was there an area for an artist in residence or just a special place for writing?
Well, with this library, it's just got loads of working spaces. So a lot of people go to the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts and work there. There is also the Jerome Robbins Dance Division, which has got a research space. So it's very well set up for going and working for many hours at a time.
And you really invested many hours as you did that at the
Yeah.
library.
Yes, I
Yeah.
certainly did. Yes.
So your life is, I think, all the aspects of your life. You started out training in ballet as a ballerina. I don't know that you necessarily completed that to perform, or did you?
Well, I suppose I did perform, but perhaps not in the way that my teenage self imagined I would. So I started ballet when I was very young, and then I went to the Royal Ballet boarding school when I was 11. And this was a very intense experience. The Royal Ballet School is this boarding school in London, in Richmond Park, and you go there if if you want to be a professional dancer, because it is very intense training. And I came to the end of that time and realized that it probably wasn't going to work out the way I wanted it to. My body wasn't quite right for it. I was getting injured and in some ways because of having a slightly curved spine, and my hips weren't quite turned out enough. So I made the decision to go to university. I went to Oxford University and studied English literature. But I couldn't leave dance behind, and I did continue to dance and perform when I could. I did a dance teaching diploma at the British Ballet Organisation. But eventually, when I became an English teacher, I just couldn't train as much as I needed to. If you want to be a professional dancer and perform, you need to be training pretty much every day. And I couldn't do that when I was working full time as a teacher. So, in some ways, coming back to dance through my writing has been wonderfully fulfilling, because it's allowed me to keep dance in my life, but in a way that works for me.
That's beautiful. That's a way to just really make the best of a situation rather than to really, and there might have been mourning involved, leaving that behind, but still being able to find a way to incorporate it into your life, because it was totally realistic that you couldn't continue because, as you said, it's so demanding in terms of what the body is like.
Yes, and I think there was mourning involved. It was a very difficult decision to leave dance that intensely, and it was my identity. And I can imagine my life going in different ways. I can imagine that I might have said, actually, I just need to leave ballet behind completely. I can't deal with this sort of this change, and it's too painful to keep it close to me. But actually, I'm very glad that I did find a way to sort of pivot with my dance love, and realize that you can be part of the world of dance in so many different ways. And for me, that has become with writing. And I hope that I'm sharing that with people in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do in the same way if I had become a sort of professional dancer.
Truly, yes. I think there's in the Sleeping Beauties, we really get an opportunity to, through the language that you use, but you really immerse us into the performance and the experience of the dancers, which only I think a dancer can do. So the fact that you're able to mold that into a really intriguing story, yes, gives us that opportunity that we wouldn't have otherwise.
It was great to, when I was writing both The Sleeping Beauties and The Dance of the Dolls, my first novel, to go to more dance classes than I had been previously, because I really wanted to remind myself and my body of all of the things that I suppose I lived with for so long, but I wanted to kind of check that I was still getting it right. And it was wonderful, because I now go to dance classes really regularly. I'd had a bit of a break from it in my mid 20s onwards for about kind of 5 years or so. So going back to ballet class, but in a very low stakes way, not needing to get cast in a show or anything, has been wonderful.
Oh, well, it certainly is an amazing experience to read about this of the many performances, but set in a time when we think about the war and all the challenges that go on, and yet keeping art alive there. We see how important, how incredibly invaluable it is to have that going on.
Yeah, this was something that I really amazed me when I was researching for the Sleeping Beauties. I knew that lots of performances had gone on, that the world of theatre and music was very, very important to people during the war, but I hadn't quite realized the extent of it. And it was interesting to see that when the war was first declared, the theatres did close, but for a very short period of time, because they quickly reopened again, partly because there really wasn't that much sort of fighting going on in London. There wasn't anything. It was kind of called the phony war in those first few months. So it felt safe to reopen the theatres. But also the government realised how important it was to have access to entertainment. And the company that I write about in the Sleeping Beauties is the Sadler's Wells Ballet Company, which is the company that's now the Royal Ballet Company. And they didn't just sort of continue throughout the war. They actually thrived. They put on new productions. There was new works were choreographed. They traveled all over the country to towns, provinces, little villages. I would say that it was during the Second World War that a kind of homegrown love for ballet started to develop. So it was a very important time for ballet.
And you really take us into a very challenging kind of, oh, you're gripping to the edge of a cliff kind of situation with the ballet company going to the Netherlands right at the brink of the invasion.
Yeah, this was another story that when I was reading about this, I knew I needed to include some kind of version of it in my novel. May 1940, it was a sort of a cultural propaganda trip that the British Council sent these dancers to The Hague, because the Netherlands was still neutral at that time. And they had this whole sequence of performances scheduled. And it was while they were there that Germany invaded and there was the battle for The Hague, and they had to be evacuated. And it was very interesting to read a whole range of versions of that from different ballet dancers and sort of company members' experiences. It was Ninette de Valois, the founder, Margot Fontaine, Constant Lambert, the music director. But what I found that was particularly useful was this journal of a dancer called a ballet member called Annabelle Fargian. And she'd written this very detailed account of kind of day by day what happened on the trip, the kind of atmosphere of it. And I got this sense that while they were there on the trip, on this tour, even when they were being evacuated, they had this bus journey that took 3 hours but only covered 3 miles, and it was very, very dangerous. And then they were put in this cargo ship. They didn't really understand the extent of the danger until a while later, I think, once they were home and sort of reflecting back on what had happened and just how dangerous it was. Thankfully, none of the dancers did lose their lives during that trip. Everyone got home safely. So my version is a kind of fictional version of this, but I tried to stay true in my writing of it about the performances they put on, the choice of productions, the tours of theatres they went to. So I was very lucky to have access to a brilliant range of resources to write that.
And that's why we feel that authenticity as we read, that we're really immersed in that time, and it's just so challenging and tense because you are taking that information from actual accounts. Right.
Yes. Yeah. It really was fascinating. There was this, I remember reading one account, which both Annabelle Fargian had written about and Margot Fontaine, about how they went up onto the roof of the hotel that they were staying in. And they could see these German planes flying in, and also the German planes kind of dropping these propaganda leaflets all over the city. And both Margot Fontaine and this corps de ballet member, Annabelle, they both just comment on Margot Fontaine's dressing gown. And I thought it was really interesting how they don't really understand, I think, until they're writing it later, just exactly what was happening here and how serious it was and how stressful it would have been for Ninette de Valois and the founder, the director of the company, and looking after some very young dancers. Some of them were kind of late teens, and having to get all of these dancers home to their families, and the responsibility of that. It was a very dramatic story, and also a story of the Second World War that's not really told very much. I think we read a lot about evacuees and experiences of particular battles and what it was like to go to France, etc. But we don't really hear a lot about what it was like to be a performer during the Second World War.
Yes, that's right. You give us an entirely different lens here that has so much value, gives us such a great and unique perspective. along with the story that you choose to tell. There's this, when we look at it as literary fiction and see the parallels between the play, the dance, the Sleeping Beauty, the story of the Sleeping Beauty, and then you're juxtaposing this other story upon it, which is really intriguing. As that evolve for you? There would be an evolution, or did you kind of already have an image and then flesh it out in context of the ballet?
I think this novel developed in layers because it is quite layered in many ways. You know, you do have the backdrop of the work of the Sadler's Wells Ballet Theatre as kind of the setting for the book, but you also have the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty, which plays out in different ways throughout the novel, both in the fact that some of the characters are preparing to perform in the ballet, The Sleeping Beauty, but also I spent quite a bit of time reading some of the older, much kind of more morally complex, darker Gothic versions of this fairy tale, in which it is definitely not kind of true love's kiss waking up the sleeping princess. It's much more problematic like that. It's non-consensual. She gives birth in her sleep to twins in one version. In one version, the prince's mother is an ogress who tries to eat her children. It's very, very, very dark. So I wanted to bring in some elements of that as well. And there are, I suppose, symbolic elements of with the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale being about kind of growing up and the transitional stages of life, kind of your first love, or hitting puberty or leaving childhood behind. All of those stages come into this fairy tale, and I wanted to interweave them throughout the story. So you had kind of that level of that layer, but then there was also the other really important element was, what was it like to be a mother during this time, a mother of someone who has been adopted, and also someone who has looked after a whole set of evacuee children during the war, and what that was like as well. So the novel built up gradually. And I think that for me was one of the most wonderful things about writing it, because I felt like I was always just drawing on so many different inspirations throughout.
And it truly layered is definitely a great description of what goes on, and how it then reveals itself as we go on. The introduction, well, of one of the main characters, Briar, how she appears on a train as the children are being returned home, and realizing this is not a coincidence. So what is going to happen with this? So it takes us, the novel, to really find all of that out. It felt like genius to be able to just keep that thread moving, but keep us really intrigued by like what's going to happen here. And then there are those dark moments that parallel Sleeping Beauty.
Yes, my first kind of draft of the plot. So I'm very much a planner. I like to plan the whole story out before I start writing a word of it. And my first plot summary was chronological. It basically started in 1919, which is, we have some flashbacks throughout the book to 1919. It kind of ended in 1946, and I looked over that with my agent, actually, and we decided that made it read a little bit too much like a 20th century epic. And really what was important was the way in which I reveal parts of the characters' lives and what's happened to them in the past. So I decided to change it so that we stay very much in the main narrative of 1946, well, kind of 1945 to 1946, building up to this performance of The Sleeping Beauty in February 1946 that reopened the Royal Opera House after the war, and trying to keep the reader immersed in that narrative drive. Like that is what is pushing us forward, is what's going to happen then, and then kind of going back in time throughout to the other elements of the stories and the characters' pasts, which I was a little bit worried about was going to make it kind of a confusing reading experience. But in the end, I think it did work. I hope.
No, it really does. And in fact, if anything, I think it's even more. I can appreciate it being more challenging to write it in that way, that we go back in time. I feel that really came across clearly enough, that we were going back and forth like that. And I think it builds the suspense even
Yeah,
more so in that way. So it
yeah.
works.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted there to be an element of kind of suspense and mystery. And, there are a lot of twists and turns along the way.
Oh, yes.
And also wondering, one of the things that I found really interesting is readers' responses to the different characters. So we have Rosamond, who is this mother who is very protective of her daughter. She's looked after all these children during the war. And she just wants what's best for her child. And then we have Briar, who has had a very troubled past, this ballerina, and she makes some pretty dodgy decisions and kind of unforgivable decisions in some ways. But I felt very close to her when I was writing her character, and I felt great sympathy for her. And I was interested to see how readers would respond to her. And it's been very varied. Some people have great sympathy for her and her experiences and understand why she's made the decisions that she has. And I suppose in the writing of her character, I wanted to keep that kind of playfulness with, do we like her? Do we not like her? Do we understand her? I'm not trying to write kind of perfect, likable characters in any way, but I think the way in which we can allow ourselves to understand her is an interesting one that's been very varied.
And I think I noticed that in the book you have some questions or topics for book groups to discuss. That being one of them is looking at these characters and the feeling about them and how they work. And I think with the way that they are, they're real. They're realistic in that way. So it's not like, making it all nice and tidy. That's not life. Not generally, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one of the elements of my engagement with the fairy tale of the Sleeping Beauty that I was interested in, because I felt that the version of the Sleeping Beauty that we know now, the kind of Disney version or the ballet version, is very much characters are good or bad. There's the good lilac fairy and the evil Carabosse fairy. There's true love, and it's kind of the Aurora's perfect and the prince is perfect and all of this. And I was interested in the way in which the ballet company, had decided to put on a production of the Sleeping Beauty at the end of the war, which felt like, this story of very straightforward good and evil, good triumphing over evil. And maybe that's something that people wanted at the end of a war. We want a sense of certainty, of feeling that things are now okay after so much turmoil, and wanting to be able to say that's the villain and that's the good person. So I suppose what I was trying to do in my version of the Sleeping Beauty was break that down a little bit and say that we obviously can't be able to decide whether someone is a hero or a villain that straightforwardly in life. And being able to cope with uncertainty is so difficult. I think I struggle with that often. You want to be able to know who someone is, like, are they a good person or are they a bad person? But that's not what people are like at all.
No, we're a blend of so much that keeps evolving and blending again. But I will say that as the book concluded, it was like, oh, but I want to know more. It's like, how will these relationships now evolve? But that's left to our imagination. But have you thought, oh, maybe I do want to see a way that there is, well, let's call it a sequel, but using these characters and having a new dynamic going on, a new story?
Yeah, I've never sort of planned what I would write in a sequel, but I suppose I have hope for the characters. I like to think that that there will be ways to move forwards, and yes, I can see that the ending does leave a lot of questions. But I hope it's also left a space for the characters to be able to grow and kind of change and find ways to reconnect.
Well, basing it on your own life and experience, having ballet, but realizing you need it to be different and still incorporating it. So you see the hope and how we can really make positive decisions and really wonderful decisions about what there is in our life. So yeah, I like that way of going forward. That sounds good.
Yes.
So the book is fairly new, but it certainly is available at all of our favorite book sources, right, Lucy?
Yes, it's available now and wherever you like to buy your books.
Excellent. So we also can learn more at your website. So let's share that.
Yes, so my website is lucyashe.com, and I also have an Instagram. I love to connect with readers on there, which is lucyashe_author.
Wonderful. So we encourage that certainly. Get the book, read it, have discussions, connect, and carry on. Discussing dance, discussing life and relationships, and where we're going from here. Right?
Yeah, I would love it if people discuss the book in a book club. I think it's got a lot of topics for that, definitely.
Yes, and I really appreciate when books, of course, the ones that really lend themselves to it, include that so that we can definitely take advantage of that, and then of course leap off into whatever directions that might take us. And in this area here in the Northwest Washington, it's really a big reading area and lots of book clubs abounding. So I think definitely recommending this to be added to the list and be used. Great. So you were teaching when you were in England. You're writing now. Are you teaching in New York?
Yes, I am. I recently started a part-time teaching job. When I first moved here, I was just writing, but I missed teaching so much that I decided I needed to go back to it. So I'm teaching English and drama, and it's great fun. And I'm directing the school play at the moment. We're doing The Crucible, and it is wonderful to be back in a school.
Oh, that's wonderful. So high school level?
High school,
Right?
yes.
Yes. Yeah. Being the crucible, of course, it would need to be. Well, there's a part of me that's quite envious of that because I had that in my past history, and it's wonderful. I found, and I would imagine you might find that too, that with doing theater, with doing drama with the kids, it was the best educational experience, that it just really made it an opportunity for everyone, regardless of what their talents were. They were all important to work together to make this a really great performance and result.
Yes. For me, I've always directed plays in the schools I've worked in. So I've directed many, many plays now. And it is one of my favorite parts of my role as a teacher, because I think it's important for young people to be given this opportunity. Even if they've never acted before, they can get involved. They can have a tiny role, or they can have a big role, or we have a set design club. You can be backstage working on sound, lighting, props. And it really helps young people to build their confidence. It's really fulfilling. I always feel so proud and also nervous on that first moment when the curtain goes up on the first performance. So I'm very excited about being back doing it again.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, kudos to you for having that opportunity again and bringing that to the students again. The arts, sadly, are not being funded to the degree that they really need to be. And we can see the value of how it's so critically important. So I'm glad that your students are having that opportunity. That's great.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, this has been wonderful, Lucy Ashe. I've really appreciated speaking with you, and I've loved this book, The Sleeping Beauties. So as we were saying, get your copy, get to the book club and share stories and ideas and just have a really wonderful time.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been great to talk to you.
Wonderful to speak with you, and we'll be looking forward to your next work. That brings us to the end of a very full hour of Inspirational Women with Lucy Ashe and Sunday Morning Magazine with Pam Fisher. I'm Kate Daniels, your host, and I greatly appreciate your sharing this hour with me and these special guests. For details you might have missed or information you'd like to know, please just send me an email, kated@warm1069.com, and I will get right back to you. Also, if you'd like to listen again or to share these important stories with your family and friends, find the podcast on our Warm 1069 webpage. Just click on the Listen tab, then Podcasts, then either of the show names, and then look for the guest names. I now wish you and your family a day of good open communication about safety, particularly as we travel around. Have a week of the same, and then please plan to join me again next weekend for another hour of Sunday Morning Magazine and Inspirational Women on Warm 106.9. Good morning.